The following is a presentation of the ForceCenter podcast feed.
From the center of the galaxy, this is the ForceCenter podcast feed, and this episode is Q's of the Force. What does Q stand for? It's a mystery. No, it's not. It's questions. Questions of the Force. We're excited to take your questions and provide our A's, our answers of the Force. I'm Joseph Scrimshaw.
Presenting our A's right here on ForceCenter. Yes. We're here.
And that is Ken Napzok, ready to present his A as well. We want to let you know that today's podcast is brought to you by Audible, another A. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/ForceCenter. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. This week, we are continuing to recommend Path to Deceit by Tessa Gratton and Justina Ireland. It is the first book in Phase 2 of High Republic, which happens earlier than Phase 1. I love how much work Star Wars makes you do. We are very excited to dive into that. If you want to listen and be all caught up with us when we discuss this book, you can download your free audiobook today by going to audibletrial.com/ForceCenter. One more time, that's audibletrial.com/ForceCenter for a free audiobook. It is almost time for questions and answers, but we have yet another A, our segment Ask. Ken, do you want to do some asking?
I'd love to do some asking. Friends, we're asking you to consider helping us over on our YouTube channel. That's right. We're trying to reach 7,000 subscribers as we are rolling up our sleeves and putting a little elbow grease into the YouTube channel in 2023. We announced the new show Figure Fights, exclusive to YouTube, starting in February. We're going to put in some more essays up there, more content, as well as the rebought broadcast of the podcast. We put those up as well. And, of course, live Q&As. More on the way. But, hey, we're trying to build out there. If you'd like to help, a lot of you already have. We want to thank you for that. Our numbers have climbed. We appreciate that. But give us a subscription over there. Ring that notification bell, all those fun things. And if you like anything that's coming out, the new things, or maybe going back, looking at the animated Databank Databank Brawl from Brian Ward, or In Memoriam series edited by Kevin Smets, taken from some old Spotlight Star Wars episodes. If you like it, hey, share, give it a like, all those kind of things to help us grow out the channel. So that is our current ask, Joseph.
It is a bold one. We're climbing towards there. It's slow and steady. I refreshed while you were doing the ask, and it went up by 1. That is the power we're looking at. It has grown quite a bit over the last couple of months as we've been paying more attention to it. So thank you all so much. And with that, we're not done thanking you, because we're going to be thanking you for your great questions. We have 2 from Twitter and 2 from our patrons on Patreon, as well as a Power of the Light Side entry. So we had better get started with a question from Twitter. This comes to us from Ross Squatch. Ross Squatch says, softball Q, I'm sure you've answered. What is your favorite Star Wars-related holiday memory? Mine is discovering the Star Wars Christmas album when I was a teen in the late 90s. My great uncle had a copy, so I got my local Silver Platters to get one for me. I've listened every year since, and even indoctrinated my kids so that future generations will indeed know what to get a Wookiee when he already owns a comb. Happy holidays, crew. Thanks for all the hard work. Thank you, Ross Squatch. This is a fun one. We've talked about holiday Star Wars memories, but I don't know if we've ever just, tried to go through like what are the greatest of the holiday memories. So definitely want to touch on that. But I also want to find out what your relationship with the Star Wars Christmas album is, Ken.
Oh, man, I love it. I love when anytime someone new discovers it, right? You saw some tweets this past week. Love seeing that. And I like you, Ross Squatch, which is still one of my favorite listener names here. It's like one of those man soap kind of things, Dr. Squatch soap. Love that, Russ. I love it. I did not discover it till, I want to say about 1995. Because it was in a stack of LPs at the radio station I was working at, where I started working as an intern in 95 and then became on-air talent and all that kind of stuff up to about 98. And so that was the first time I pulled out and I was like, what the bleep is this? And, it's bells, bells, bells. And yeah, what do you get a Wookiee for Christmas? It already has a comb, all those wonderful things. And that copy is my copy. Now, I'm confessing to maybe a little bit of a crime here. I don't know what statute of limitations are. There was a changeover in leadership and even a company, small town radio, but we were not bought by a corporation, bought by a local owner. There's a weird changeover. And Dastardly Ken, who at this point had not had a sip of alcohol in his life. I was pure as the driven snow. I wanted that. I just felt I needed that. And I knew it was in a stack of LPs. We didn't play it on the station. You can't just really play songs on a radio station unless you report them. At least that's what you're supposed to do, so that the right people can get paid, or at least the record companies can get their money. And so it hadn't been played. It wasn't like we pulled it out every Christmas. It was just sitting in a stack of LPs. So one night, it may have gone home with me. And that is my copy that is still sitting in my living room till this day. So I just loved that it existed. Loved that it existed. There's something about it that's just so wonderfully bizarre. And yes, we can take Star Wars. Star Wars should be taken seriously. It affects our lives. It changes our lives. It guides our lives. If you let it in your heart to a certain degree, totally. But never forget that Star Wars also had Anthony Daniels singing Bells, Bells, Bells.
This is a great memory, and I'm glad that you finally did report the album. You didn't play it on air, but you've been spinning it at home for over 20 years.
Yeah.
That's great. You're an early bloomer compared to me discovering this album. My parents must not have picked it up or whatever. Or kids, for some reason, kids at school who wanted to, brag that they had the Death Star play set. They didn't want to brag about having this, apparently. So I just didn't know it existed. It was in around 2002 or 2003. There was a traveling Smithsonian Star Wars exhibit, I believe, but it was. I remember seeing it because it was like, wow, Vader's really that tall and Carrie Fisher is really that short, because it was right. The real Leia Gown and a stormtrooper, and like I really didn't get to see stuff like that, so I remember it being a big deal. I was really excited to go, and I think I went twice. I think I went with my family and with my girlfriend at the time's family, but it was in the gift store. And at first I was like, oh, this is new, weird. And then I looked at it and it's like, no, it's not. And then other people told me their memories of it. And I looked through the songs and I was like, this is bonkers. This is great. This is, I love Star Wars and comedy coming together. And this is, I don't know. I think something I need to change about myself. Sometimes I see something and think, this is not for background times. This is not for casual times. This is only for when I can give it my full attention. And I thought, I don't want to just play this in the background as a joke at a party. I'm going to make time during the holiday season. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to listen to this CD I purchased in, I believe, 2002, 20 years ago. I still have it. I know where it is. It is still in the plastic wrapping.
Wow.
I've heard bits and pieces. I've heard jokes. I've read things about it. But I have been meaning for 20 years to give it my full, undivided attention, like blackout curtains, no sensory experience but music, and fully digest it. So clearly, we're still in the holiday season, in my opinion. So maybe this year I will give it a full listen.
I mean, I get that. I get having something on the shelf. I mean, I've got a couple books I've been waiting to read for 7 years. Who doesn't? But Yeah. I mean, it's an experience, right? Pour one of those Scrimshaw, House of Scrimshaw cocktails you and Sarah have and enjoy it.
That's what a Wookiee needs, other than a comb, is a nice space cocktail. So I'll make that. So in some ways, that's a really favorite holiday memory that I've been waiting to give my full undivided attention to the Star Wars Christmas album for 20 years. But what are other memories like Ross is sharing of really, this is a vital coming together of Star Wars in the holidays for you?
Look, Ross, you're saying, sorry for the softball question. This one was hard for me. I have discovered, even when you and I were putting together our favorite Last Jedi memories, I was telling you off air, I was struggling to remember 5 years ago. And not that life is so hectic, all those kind of normal reasons. I don't know. I think I've glommed on to like 10 stories I tell over and over and over again. And those are my memories of my youth. And I thank God don't have to write an autobiography or anything anytime soon. But I really try to dig in, and none super jump to mind. So that caused me to kind of check down to a different receiver and try to complete another type of pass. So I got two kind of answers here. I do want to start with what I'm calling the Kenner Christmas, and that's Christmas with a K from my youth. For me, this is the one. This is one of those stories I have told before, but it's that the Christmas that I got the Y-Wing, which I do have a picture of, that box, that fresh, clean, bright box with me holding it in my Return of the Jedi shirt. I believe I had the green one that is in that Spotlight Star Wars thumbnail you put together for us. That was Christmas of '83. I've done the math on it. I think that photo has the date on it, as photos often do. But that is actually until my own Star Wars Christmases that I might have given myself in the modern era of, oh, it's Christmas, I'm going to buy myself 6 Rogue One Black Series figures at this Walgreens. Until then, that was like the Star Wars Christmas. Really, there's gifts along the way. Don't worry about that. But, 82 would have been too early for me. I had not seen, obviously, Return of the Jedi yet. May of '83, Return of the Jedi comes out. That's the height of I'm in love with this new film I saw and this franchise. And then going forward, what obviously wasn't the Star Wars left my life, but by '84, it's the Christmas of Transformers, or '85, Christmas of I want a baseball glove or baseball cards. Like Christmas of '83 was, dear God, I love Star Wars. And to get that Y-Wing, that's why it means so much. That's why I love Y-Wings. It's connected to all that. So I'll start there. But then I try to think of some modern stuff. And you know what it is? Again, we're in that era, especially, kidults, as we're now called, apparently, according to all the highfalutin articles out there. We do have some discretionary income along the way over the last 10 to 15 years. And you are going to buy yourself that Ewok Lego set, or you are going to treat yourself in the toy aisle. So it's a different experience of holidays, and it becomes about family or connections. And Star Wars being now a December tradition, or at least it was from 2015 to 2019, and I trust it will be again. But that was always a time that I did get to go see Star Wars with family or with friends. Seeing Rise of Skywalker in Flagstaff, Arizona. Seeing Force Awakens with my family. I think it was my mom didn't go, but my dad and sister, I think my nephew went in that one there as well. And it isn't just that I'm some highfalutin, high-class Star Wars fan that is going down to steerage for the day. I'm not approaching it from that angle, but to be amongst the general public, to be amongst people who are like, hey, it's like Christmas, let's go see a Star Wars film because the family's in town. It's the big event, and we're just going to go see it, and we're going to take it as it plays for us, which means sometimes maybe they don't like it as much as you or I or others, or maybe they like it more than others out there because they just take what is on the screen and don't worry about much more than that. I always tell the joke in 2015. It was actually via telephone. My dad had seen it first by himself, where he called me. He was like, I really liked it. I think they're going to leave it open for more. That ending there with Luke on the hill, like, yep, Dad, they're gonna make more here. They are gonna make more.
We're just gonna leave this door open. We'll see.
Yeah, he's like, I think there's gonna be more. Yeah, there is. There's gonna be more. But so we can make fun of that, and we can have that kind of, again, like we're Billy Zane on the Titanic kind of attitude. But it's truly fun, and it's warm Star Wars holiday memories. The Rise of Skywalker viewing with my fiance and her family in Arizona was, the crowd. I know there were some people who didn't like it, but the crowd was cheering and whooping and walked out happy and with smiles and went on with their lives. And I love that. But just have the family be like, yeah, that was great fun. Have my fiance and her sister applaud really loud, and us as well, but applaud really loud at Larma Dacey's smooch at the end, right? And do so in that state. Meant a lot to me. A lot of those kind of things. And I don't mean to make a blanket statement of Arizonans, but, there's a challenge out there. So, yeah, it's just those kind of things, right? Of just like, we're not reviewing it. We're not going to a screening. We're not going to worry about press premieres. All those things are fun. But to go just roll up our sleeves on holiday, national holiday, and go celebrate Star Wars, I'll take those memories with me.
Oh, that is great. That's a really awesome holiday memory.
Yeah. Sorry. It was a lot. I apologize.
No. No apologies necessary. I'm sure. I'm sure I will go just as long, if not longer. No. I'm just thinking about if I've had an experience like that. Sarah and I's a little family of two go to holiday movies, but my family has not gone to a holiday movie around the holidays in a long time, and I'm just like kind of fascinated with what that would be like to see a Star Wars with with family, and what a different experience that is, and getting away from the covering it and the sort of the pundit thing and the early screenings and the weekend podcast coverage, and now it's just the holidays, and that's what a lot of people are doing, is seeing the new Star Wars. That's a great memory. I was I'm so glad that you have photos of your Y-Wing purchase, and I love what you're saying about being able to identify the year based on what you had. I was talking on our news show about going through a lot of family photos while I was at home in Minneapolis, and it was funny. Like, we were looking at some photos, and my dad was like, I think it's this year, and I was like, we are covered in ET paraphernalia. It's 1982. And the other one's like, this is 83. It's like, impossible. My brother is wearing a Ghostbusters t-shirt. It's 1984. They're all so pop culture tied. So an older memory that I believe I have mentioned, but is fun for kind of those first steps of becoming a kidult. This is the year 1998. I think both my brother and I kind of have some discretionary funds, and I think it's, for me, kind of around that time where Generation X was kind of, we grew up, snarky and ironic and all that. And there's that moment where I feel like all of Generation X, generalizing here a little bit, but much of Generation X looks around at each other and is like, are we going to put away the toys? And all of us going, no, we're not. Maybe we'll claim it's ironic that isn't it funny that we still have toys, or maybe we'll get sincere and say we like these things and they have value, all that. So for me, it was in that time of like, I'm gonna collect the hell out of the Power of the Force 2 line. I want it. And it had always been a wound that we did not have the AT-AT, as we called it back in the day, or the AT-AT for some people. We never had the original Kenner, and my brother got me the Power of the Force 2 AT-AT, and that was phenomenal. And at the same time, I had got him the N64 Rogue Squadron video game, which for both of us, those were both about $50 then, which was like a ginormous amount of money. So that is always a great memory of that exchange of beginning of adulthood, expensive, extravagant Star Wars Christmas presents. And it went and took the AT-AT out of the box and put it up on the little buffet display area in my new apartment, where other people might put up dishes or family photos. I put a giant stomping ice war machine, and I loved it.
As you should.
As I should. So that's an older one. And then the first thing that came to my mind with the Raw Squatch's great question is, a new one from this year. This is also about me going home to my dad's place for the holidays. I had stopped at the Target that I used to shop at, that I bought many Power of the Force 2 action figures at. I picked up the Black Series Din and Grogu ice spiders because I just like imagining those are the holiday edition.
Yes,
because Din has the snow, actually put on him, articulated on him. It's like he's in Minnesota. So I bought that for myself, and then I passed the ornament aisle, and this is like 2 days before Christmas, and the ornaments were 50% off. And there's an Obi-Wan ornament I've been looking at from the new series. He's kind of in his Jabeam outfit, blade out. And the first time I saw it, I was like, I got to get that. We already have a lot of Star Wars on the tree, Sarah, but I got to get that. And she's like, yeah, of course. And then I look at it, and it is comically bad with the paint job. Like almost all of them have his eyes. They're either googly eyes or his eyes are rolling up in the back of his head, like he hates you, or he is half asleep, or experiencing some sort of bodily pleasure. Everyone is funny, and like almost all of them with the paint on the hairline is off, so it looks like he's got a weird flesh growth, and then he's balding at the same time. And I was like, it's half off, and it's funny, and I was just like, that might be cool for me to bring to my dad and say, hey, I'm spending the holidays here. I'm putting an ornament on the tree. So it's the family tree. So I bought it, brought it home. I was like, can I put an ornament on the tree? And my dad was like, yeah. So I put up Obi-Wan and really enjoyed it. It was Obi-Wan and mostly like a couple snow people and festive balls and Obi-Wan. And that was it on this very large tree. And when I left, I put out the box and I was like, okay, this is my ornament on the tree now. I'm going to ask you to pack it up and make sure it's here next year. So it was a very happy Star Wars holiday memory.
Oh, see, have Star Wars will travel.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep. Freakish Obi-Wan is now a part of my holiday tradition.
There's truly something special about those. It's kind of like the spirit of the holiday album. It's just like a weird off-brand, not exactly right Star Wars stuff. It's just, that's somewhat official. We're not talking about some knockoff, Space Wizard Man or some weird figure. Like a bootleg. Like, I love that stuff. I love that stuff.
I've seen them at 3 different Targets, and it's like, it's not a one-off. That it's consistently bad, and it makes me want to have this like narrative that there's like there's some elf at Santa's workshop who like everybody knows like, man, Petey's trying, but Petey just doesn't have it, so we're gonna let him do these Obi-Wan ornaments.
Oh, Petey, that's the best.
Oh, Petey. So great question, Ross Squatch. We are going to move on to our next question from Joe Becker. Joe asks, what if the Solo movies started with Han, Harrison, and Lando, Billy, and they were playing sabacc and the conversation led to the flashback movie, handing the baton to the young guys, then end with old Han going to Jakku for the Falcon? Would people then be more connected? I think Joe's asking a great question of, acknowledging that some people enjoyed the Solo movie. Some people didn't, but even some people who did enjoy the movie, would say things like, but he doesn't look like Han, or it's a great movie if you pretend he isn't Han, because that's not Han. So I think Joe's getting into this idea of, would people feel more connected to the that is Han, that is Lando, if they were, there was bookends with the original actors. So Ken, how do you feel about this?
Yeah, first of all, I've cut a lot of those people out of my life, so that's where I'll start. I don't talk to them as much anymore. But I think, look, perhaps it would have allowed people to accept it a lot better, as if those performers were giving their blessings in a way. The truth is, I think they both already had done that in their own way. Remember those photos of Billy D and Donald Glover having lunch together, right? Just talking about the character. And I don't think there was definitely nothing negative in the press from Billy D. Williams or Harrison Ford about it. Then you got the press. I'm particularly thinking of that one video where Harrison sneaks up on Alden and, surprises him and is like, he did great. I've seen the movie twice. Like, all the stuff was out there. But, again, the general population, they don't have the time to look that up. They're not sitting in the theater going, oh, did Billy D have lunch with Donald Glover? Did he? So perhaps it would have been something on screen that would have worked and that people would have accepted more. The connection thing, I actually like this pitch of Han going to Jakku or mentioning that. Yeah, that could have worked. I just think, here's where I go with it. I just think creatively, Joe, it would have been a little too on the nose for a story that, as much as I love Solo with a capital L, it has some on the nose beats in it already. The Kessel Run, how I met Chewie. Chewie gets a nickname, all those things. And that didn't work for a lot of people. I enjoyed it. But I actually really understand that it comes across as like, this is the story you kind of might have thought in terms of some of these big beats in Han's life and career. So it would have been like, oh, of course it's a bookend. I'm not saying everyone would have thought that. I'm not saying I would have thought that. But I think, to me, looking at it now, years later, that might have been the feeling. I think at the end of the day, Solo was such a lesson. If you want to look at positively, a lesson in marketing and promotion, just how the zeitgeist conversations can lead, whether you want it to or not. And that what I mean by that specifically this question is, some of the talk on Alden, you might not like the performance. That's totally fine. It just sometimes seems like it was like, I don't know, like no one would have that Harrison didn't want this or George wouldn't have liked this. And this is, by the way, I think it's one of George's favorites of the sequel era. Like, go ask George in the Sabaro. I don't know, but you know what I mean? Like, and but the conversation was that this was the redheaded stepchild of Star Wars. And by the way, I'm engaged to a redhead, so I'd say that carefully. And that's just not fair for the movie. There's so much that I don't think was fair for the movie, where people just heard it and took it. So, yeah, maybe all I have to say, maybe it needed that. Maybe it needed to feel more connected. Maybe the stakes in that movie were too small. And maybe people were just confused going, but that's not my Han. Hashtag not my Han. But if Harrison had shown up, would it have been okay? I don't know. You know, he showed up in a Young Indiana Jones Chronicles as a bookend, old Indy. Maybe a little different time. You know, if Last Crusade had been the reverse, where Harrison shows up and River Phoenix is him the rest of the movie, would that have been needed? Yeah, I don't know. So we'll never know, of course, Joe. But it's fun to think of. Because all that said, and I'll pass it back to you, Joe. So I'm monologuing today. A Sabak scene with Billy D and Harrison at this age. I want a short film of that. Please, that would have been fun to see. Give me that now.
No, I love it. I love the monologues because they are insightful, and I love hearing where we're on the same page. I think that having them there as this introduction, this bookend, I think it would have been a split, because I think Solo's just always going to be a film where, are you on board with a different actor playing young versions of Han and Lando, or are you not? You know, and I think for some fans, seeing Harrison Ford and Billy D. Williams would have worked exactly as Joe is describing. Some fans would have felt like that connective tissue was there, that Harrison and Billy D. Williams were there coaching them, and that it's all the same character, and maybe even there's a little bit of, hey, they look different because this is a memory that ends with old Han and Lando going doodle-doo, doodle-doo. We fade into it, maybe, you know, joking around a little bit, but I mean it sincerely, that maybe having the original actors there would have given it this stamp of authenticity, and then the characters in the film would have felt more to the viewers like the characters they know. It might have helped some people. I think other fans, it would have made the existing disagreements about how people feel about it even stronger. I think for some people, it would have felt like, well, that's rubbing salt in the wound to see real Han. And then we cut to this kid who has a totally different structured face, whose vocal register is higher. You know, the kind of things that just really do bother some people. Donald Glover nailed the vibe of Lando, but physically looked really different. Like, the kind of people who are bothered by that, it might have made it even worse, right? So I think it's just kind of a mixed bag. For me, for my taste, I'm really okay that the young actors played the soul of the characters. They did not do impressions of the actors, Harrison Ford and Billy D. Williams. They played the truth of the characters, Han Solo and Lando Calrissian. And for me, they absolutely knocked it out of the park. Is always a respect for people that it didn't work. But man, the more I sit with it, I love that movie. I'm sorry I'm turning the last couple episodes of ForceCenter into Dad Center. But I know my dad would like this movie, and I was gonna buy it at that Target too, and then he doesn't have a disc player right now, so that's another Christmas present I need to get him, so I can sit down and have him watch Solo with me. So I think there's a problem. I think there's a possibility where that having them there just makes the extreme opinions of being totally cool with it and being frustrated by it even more extreme, you know? But I think the other thing, that it's such a neat and interesting idea. For me, I think my writer brain goes on with the idea of older Han and Lando bookends of what's the storytelling reason for that? What's the mood reason for that? Star Wars certainly does have a history of this is a story that's being told. I think a long time ago is a storybook intro. But I think I'd be really intrigued by the movie being very, very different, because I feel like Han and Lando would have different points of view on this story, right? So if they're both kind of being the storyteller, it would invite me into like, are they pushing and pulling? Does Han tell one chapter and Lando tells another? You know, would it invite me as the audience to question this story? Because this is the memory of two old, mostly friends, but slight frenemies with big egos, different takes, and years of legend building. And that's the other thing that's really interesting to me about it. If you framed it as this is a story or a memory that is being shared from Han Solo and Lando Calrissian, you always want to take the storyteller into account, right? Mm-hmm. And these are two characters who are interested in active legend building.
Yeah.
It's part of how they get through the galaxy. The film, this actual film Solo, it's obviously in their characters other places, but it happens in the film Solo, right? Lando saying everything you've heard about me is true, right? Lando is interested in and aware of the power of crafting your own narrative. Mm-hmm. He wants people to think he's a big deal. He wants there to be tall tales about him. He's trying to encourage it. He is recording his own stories for posterity, possibly exaggerating. Lando is basically, in our day and age, an expert at building his galactic brand.
Yes.
And Han knows the value of building his galactic brand, and everyone thinks his Instagram photos are fake. He's not really there. He's acknowledging it. Han Solo is my friends are just off the center of just off frame, smiling and laughing and having a great time. Because Lando successfully builds his brand and his legend by telling stories about himself. And Han spends what we apparently see as his entire life trying to build up his brand by going, I'm a rebel, I'm a criminal, I'm a scoundrel. And you're like, hey, you're a bum who doesn't get the job done. It's like, yeah, but I made the Kessel Run, and everybody he tries to tell about the Kessel Run, from Chewbacca, his best friend, down to Rey, Miss Maramunet of it, to Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah,
everyone that Han tells his tall tale legend to doubts him, mocks him, misquotes him. It's just, to me, it's fascinating that it's essential to these characters that they want to brand build, legend build. One of them is great at them, and one of them is comically bad at them. So what happens to the story when it is those two telling their own story, and by extension, absolutely building their legend?
See, but now you're pitching something I would want. Now I think I almost changed my own answer. Yeah, that's creative. Let's put that in there. And again, just to see these two performers at this age embody those characters together. And again, I know a lot of people sequel era are like, hey, we didn't even get the big three in one shot. I get it. I feel that pain sometimes too. But yeah, and maybe Force Awakens would have been the spot for Lando. But that's hilarious. It's such a wonderful look at the characters. And I'll say this though, I agree with your point of even if the characters were there, it might not have worked for everybody in the way this question's intended, because you had Mark Hamill there as Luke Skywalker, and that didn't work for people. He literally was the character, and people are like, "Well, this is not only not something I like, but this is a conspiracy."
Right.
The fact was he there at blaster point because they wouldn't let him out. Like, so yeah, weird times.
Yeah. And obviously Mark Hamill talked about how he
helped
reluctance. Yeah. he mentioned his reluctance. In the same breath, he almost always said, but I came around to it and saw what a great film it was. And yeah, it would have been repetitive if it was the very standard mentor tale and that. But sometimes people don't hear that part of the tale. Of Mark and Luke in the sequel trilogy. Yeah. So very interesting. I don't know. I love the journey of grumpy Harrison Ford, who, had his ups and downs with the fame that Star Wars brought, or rather Star Wars. He seemed to like the fame and the opportunities that Star Wars brought him. But had ups and downs with Star Wars, coming around to just being like, I so respect the craft of acting that I saw a Star Wars movie twice so I could really appreciate the amazing acting job that Alden Ehrenreich did to capture the essence of this character, and wanting to see it twice to be amazed and impressed by, the magic trick that Alden Ehrenreich pulled off, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think it was magic.
Magic. All right. And on that note, we are going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with some cues from our patrons on Patreon. Back in a moment. And we are back to take those cues from our P's on Patreon. Never gonna say that again. This comes to us from patron Perry Wakefield. I apologize, Perry, for saying P. Anyway, moving on. Perry says, hello, ForceCenter. I think there is a great conversation to be had as to whether or not Star Wars is fantasy or sci-fi or mythology. I believe it is equally parts of all three. I just rewatched the Mortis arc of the Clone Wars. I think that is a great example of fantasy. Andor, I believe, is a great example of dystopian sci-fi. In the opening line of A Long Time Ago in a Galaxy Far, Far Away gives it a mythological feel to me. What are your thoughts? Thanks, and keep up the great work. Oh, I love this question. I love looking at it. I love hearing other people's sort of takeaway of what genres mean to them and how they see those genres manifest in Star Wars. So, Ken, monologue away. Go for it.
Perry, I think this is a great answer that you provided, that it is really all three. And it's part of that stylistic buffet we talk about here. A lot of times we talk about it in terms of genre, Western, horror, all those kind of things. But I think just what Star Wars is, it can and should be and is all three. I've been one that is always on that kind of almost grumpy, fist on the table. It's fantasy. It's not sci-fi, but that's incorrect. I think for me, that it's not just one. So therefore I think this is my answer, that's all three. But if there was a DL-44 blaster to my head and I had to choose one, I would go just with, hey, it's modern mythology. That encapsulates all my feelings on it and what I connect to. And it explains it for myself the best. Like when I try to dive into why I love Star Wars. The reason, especially over the last couple of years, and I admit I'm a bit of an a-hole, bit of a grump when it comes to this stuff overall. It's hard. I don't like to watch things. So a lot of the times I have to really, Ken, you like Star Wars? You would like fill in the blank on a wonderful show, movie, or piece of art, media content. And I have to be like, I got to tell you, I don't like sci-fi. I like Star Wars. And I don't mean to be, this, too special kind of, again, I keep making, not Billy Zane in Titanic. Poor Billy Zane. He's done nothing wrong today other than sound like he's in the upper crust. I don't try to make it like that. I've because you and I and many others kind of live as fans online and shows. I don't think anyone approaches it in a bad way. I get grumpy about, can you like Game of Thrones? You'll like Witcher. You'll like Last Kingdom. I have to be like, I like Game of Thrones. And I think that is spoiled just kind of me looking at Star Wars with this lens of it's all of it. And it's under the umbrella of modern mythology or mythology just in general. And there's some parts of it that are 100% sci-fi. Yeah, recently you could look at Andor, but before that, 100% fantasy, world between worlds. What the bleep is that if it's not fantasy? Mortis, a lightsaber is both fantasy and sci-fi. It is a laser sword, but it's also this mythic thing. So I think I don't want to say correct way to look at it, but for me, when I just think of why do I love Star Wars, it is a modern piece of mythology that, and all that applies to that. And I love that. And, it also helps me accept that there's parts of Star Wars I don't gravitate as much. So that sci-fi angle, I don't gravitate to sci-fi as much. I love Star Trek stuff. I don't, it's always been a little bit more sci-fi for me. And I can't tell you why that doesn't pull me in as much as pew, pew, pew. Cause there's pew, pew, pew in Star Trek. I can't tell you why. I can't put a finger on it. I just know from an early age, Star Wars was my thing, but I love Star Trek 6, love Star Trek 4. I can go on for days about that. I even like Star Trek 8. I think it's great. First Contact. But call it a mythology reminds me that it's a big umbrella and there's a lot of different parts and you don't have to connect with all of it on an individual basis. You just connect with Star Wars.
No, I think that's a great monologue. And I really agree with, kind of just choosing to say here, it's got all of these pieces. What pieces are moving to me, and what makes it unique to me. I think modern mythology is a great catch-all because I think mythology is sort of an undeniable part of Star Wars. It's built on specific ideas of myths. Lots of studies of myth are obviously very reflected, not just the Joseph Campbell stuff, but other people's analysis of myth. Star Wars comes up a ton. because it was built that way. I also think space fantasy, is a great catch-all for Star Wars, to kind of acknowledge the sci-fi part of it, but also say that fantasy is a lot. You can draw some more distinct parallels, I think, in the kind of the story structure to fantasy. I kind of think each individual fan should embrace Star Wars, how they want to. What do you enjoy about fantasy in as a genre? And so when you see fantasy and say, here's what I love about fantasy, do you see those elements of fantasy that you love in Star Wars, and then take that over to sci-fi, to samurai films, to Western films, to 20th century romance comedy films, pulp magazines, adventure serials, paperback novels, all of that stuff, you can see all these trappings for sure.
Yeah.
But when I was really trying to think through this question, we talk about the why a lot when we're sort of talking about the story and the character choices of Star Wars, of why did they do that? What is this really about ultimately? And to me, the why of the different genre labels is the most important, because you can get into a thing where you're just like, you're ticking off surface level. What's their technology like? What is the story structure? And you're talking about great stuff, interesting stuff. But for me, it's ultimately about the why of what makes fantasy a different genre from sci-fi, and then how does that apply to Star Wars? And like, to me, I think there are tons of sci-fi elements because it's set in space. It's happening a long time ago, but they have massively advanced technology compared to us. So for me, the sci-fi is in the trappings. It's the technology. It's a little bit more of the how and not the why of like, yes, a lightsaber is advanced technology from our human perspective, but it's a total Arthurian sword in the stone. That blade was coming to Rey in the dark forest. Everything else other than the futuristic lightsaber in that great scene in Force Awakens is deeply invested in fantasy. So there's always that balance. And to me, I love what Perry says about Andor being an example of dystopian science fiction. So I think it's definitely dystopian, and there's definitely, even with Nemec's great speech about technology, it's drawing in the really putting the focus on technology, getting into dystopian stuff. But for me, the big difference between science fiction and fantasy, the why of them, is I feel like science fiction is a genre, if you put aside the trappings of the technology, it's almost always a genre that is wrestling with where we might be headed. And sometimes it's the possibility of, Star Trek has this great hope of, what if we could work together more and have much more of a paradise? And then as we go out into the galaxy in the universe with this great spirit of togetherness, of federation, of people working together. Now we want to meet even more people. How are we going to deal with the challenges that come up with that? It's starting from a utopia place, and then can we keep it? And so it's this hopeful vision of what we could be in the future. You get to the Enterprise, the Star Trek show Enterprise, and the opening credits are literally like, here's real world events leading up to the events of Star Trek, right? And I feel like with dystopian sci-fi, so much of it is, this is where we might be headed if these specific societal problems continue. What is the worst version of where we might be headed? And fantasy, to me, is more interested in kind of wrestling with forever problems. Not in that the problems have to be there forever, but they're cyclical and they're going to come up again. They're always going to be a challenge, right? Anger will always be a temptation. The young will always need mentors. Stuff is going to happen to you that happens to Frodo of, I know that, bad times are always going to come again and you're going to have to face them. I really wish it didn't have to be me and it didn't have to be during my time so I could sing songs and eat cakes, right? I think that idea of it's a forever challenge to fight our darkest instincts and impulses, and to walk the high road of trying to find peace and to find unity. But you're never just going to beat the darkness once. It's going to rise again in some way, and how can different generations be prepared and stop as many people as possible from being hurt? To me, that's like the why of fantasy, and that's why it's such a trope in fantasy that the Dark Lord rose again, right?
Yes.
And you have that across, Lord of the Rings to Harry Potter to, even the controversial return of Palpatine. But even if it isn't Palpatine, it's the dark side. It's Kiadi Mundi going, we live in a sci-fi utopia. In the story of Star Wars going, actually, we live in a space fantasy where the Sith are going to attempt to return. You're never going to wipe them out entirely. It's a metaphor,
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what I get really interested in is that why. And I'm open to people totally, of course, disagreeing or having a different perspective. But sci-fi fantasy, it's like, what are these stories interested in? What makes these genres a little different from one another, rather than more than just trapping of sci-fi happens in the future and fantasy happens in the past? Because Star Wars turns that on its head, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. At the end of the day, I like Star Wars. That's my answer. Yeah,
no, and I think that is what's so great about it is it incorporates all these things, but in combining them, it becomes more than the sum of its parts.
Yeah,
And the final thing for me is I think Perry talks about mythology. You say modern mythology, and to me, mythology is the part of Star Wars that is explicitly meant to teach. Right? Yep. Some stories are just kind of they want to be cathartic. They want to be poke at a problem and go, how do we solve this? Star Wars wants to have some ideas about how you could address problems. Lucas has been explicit about this. This is the part of it where it's, for 12-year-olds of all ages. I don't think Lucas turns and says that to an audience full of adults with lightsabers to make fun of them. It's because that's a part of it is, my understanding of the history of mythology is it's trying to understand why we're here. It's working through the fears of that time, whatever time the mythology is told in. It's working through fundamental questions of existence. And I think the fact that since the beginning, a declared point of the first Star Wars film is Lucas saying, here's some guides on how to not give into anger and how to work together and make better choices. That makes it mythology to me.
Yeah, and that's again why this connects with us on specific ways for our own lives. That's where I been a fan since I can remember. Right, 83, that Christmas of 83. I've fallen more in love with Star Wars from, I'll even say 2017 on, especially the way we talk about it here, but the way we look at it, and I can't escape that. Where anytime I sit down, whether it's a 5-minute Forces of Destiny short or a 2.5-hour movie. What's in it for us and what's in it for me in terms of the big life lessons is what I pull out more than anything. And it's like a marriage. You got to stoke the flames and you fall in love with the person, blah, blah, all those things you've heard. By the way, I'm not officially married. That's what Star Wars has been for me when I started looking at Star Wars like that. In a way I hadn't. It always had been there. But, even that's why I talk so strongly about the getting out of the prediction game. 2015, 2016, working some of the digital media companies I worked at, that was how you talked about it. What's the prediction? And that's so surface level. And once I moved past that, for me, for others, it doesn't have to be, and looked at it as truly, it's mythology with a purpose, even down to a 2-minute short on the YouTube Kids channel for Star Wars. It's trying to tell us something. It's trying to ask some questions. I've gotten so much more enjoyment out of it than before.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. That's a great question and a great conversation. Thank you very much, Perry. We are going to go, Ken, from one of the biggest questions possible. Perry basically asked us, what is Star Wars? And from that, we're going to go down to, what does this specific title of this specific episode of this specific animated show mean? What's that all about? This comes to us from Anakin Crespin, who always asks us great and fun and interesting questions. Thank you, Anakin. Anakin says, hello. Yesterday, my girlfriend Miranda asked me a question about the Clone Wars episode Shadow Warrior that I could not answer, and am passing on to you guys. So in the episode where Jar Jar must impersonate Boss Leone after Richelieu mind controls Leone with the necklace and stabs him, who is the Shadow Warrior referred to in the title? Jar Jar, Richelieu, someone else I'm not thinking of? Hopefully it's not too obvious. And if you don't already know, I know that you two can get to the bottom of it. Thanks. Well, thank you, Anakin, for the confidence. We'll offer some A's, but I don't know if they will be correct, if this answer is knowable. Ken, where do you go with this?
So I didn't have time to rewatch the episode, but I did bring up a Wookiee Wikipedia summary and took my mind back there. First of all, you and I just covered this episode not too long ago on Clone Wars Report, and it's a great episode.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of things happen in this episode, and it's one of our favorite Jar Jar episodes, which the Clone Wars features a lot. So in trying to break down, you and I, this is why we discussed the titles. I can't remember what you and I said. I should try to pull up any notes. So if I repeat myself or completely go in a different direction, I apologize. I really think, especially when you dig into this episode, it's not just Richelieu influencing Boss Leone. It goes to Grievous, it goes to Dooku, it goes to Palpatine. And I don't know. I still, from this vantage point, I think there's a little bit of it that is Jar Jar, because he's definitely a warrior in this episode, fighting for the good cause here, and always doing some brave things, and always proving that all of us matter, and all of us are in on the fight, and all of us bring something to the table. One of the big cores of the Jar Jar character to us. I do look at Dooku. Palpatine, it's always easy to answer because he is at the center of it all. But Dooku during this time, what he's selling in this episode too. It's about, Richelieu. He's playing on the Naboo Gungan divide, and I'll help you take Theed City. I'll help you do this. The Separatists, we're here for that. We're here for those kind of freedoms and justices as we build a safe and secure society. It is all in the shadows, and he's very much there. Because one of my favorite parts of this episode is there's that kind of like Sith, we'll call it a Sith substation on Naboo.
It's like really is.
Yeah, those police stations at the mall where they're like, hey, you get a bench and a chair and a computer, and it's a police substation. And
it's not a full place. It's just you can order from the Sith catalog there, but you can't pick up the items there.
Yeah, and it's just there, and it's been there, and how that ties to Palpatine and everything. And we don't know all those answers, so that's part of the shadow too. So I go to that. I go to the dark side. And Richelieu's probably in that as well, but it all roads lead to the Sith during this time for me.
No, I think those are really great thoughts. The bit of information that I was able to find on the Clone Wars, on the StarWars.com Clone Wars episode guides, Kristen Baber did a great job with. It says the episode's title is a nod to the English translation of Kakumusha. I know I'm saying that incorrectly. I apologize. I don't know the correct pronunciation. But that is the English translation of a 1980 Akira Kurosawa film produced by George Lucas. So I think the title itself is a nod, is what this information is giving us, but it still doesn't answer Anakin's question. I agree with you. I kind of think this is one of those titles where it's fun to try it on in different ways. I always talk about, I love Chapter 3 of The Mandalorian being called The Sin. Because there are lots of different perspectives in the episode of if you asked individual characters, if you told those characters, hey, these couple days of your life are called the sin. What was the sin? Different characters would say, well, it's when Din did this. It's when Din didn't do this, Yeah. And I feel like Shadow Warrior could be like that. If you wanted to put a positive spin on it, if it's a heroic, if you're hearing that heroically, it is literally undercover Jar Jar, right? It's Binks undercover, right? So he is pretending to be Boss Leone, and he is being this incredibly brave warrior in doing that. So you could apply it to Jar Jar if you wanted to. I think Shadow, particularly in a story that is about the dark side, to me it perhaps implies a little bit of menace, a little bit of malice. So if I was going to try to put it on a character, I'd probably put it on Leone being under the influence of a literal shadow in Richelieu, of being under Leone is being forced into going to war. He is a warrior who is under the influence of a shadow. So I guess you could also put it on Richelieu because he is the shadow behind the warrior. But then as the episode in which really a shocking amount of things happens in this 24 minutes. Dooku is, on planet in the Sith substation, the Sith outlet store. And he is revealed as the direct Sith behind this particular plan. So he is the Shadow Warrior. So at the end of the day, if I was going to write me an essay, and say, you have to make an argument for what the title is referring, I would say that Shadow Warrior is the dark side itself. This episode is so much about the dark side. It's layers and layers and layers of deceit. And at the end of the day, it is the dark side. It is Dooku knowingly letting the dark side dogs run wild, of I can use anger and distrust to break something. There is peace between the Gungans and the Naboo. Our war has made times really hard in Naboo, so there isn't enough going around. As soon as people are suffering, probably work better for them to come together, right? But the dark side wants people, when they're out there having the hardest time, to blame someone else and fight about it. And that's the heart of what is going on in this episode. Is Dooku is deploying the shadow warrior that is the dark side, that's anger and distrust, to break an alliance that actually makes the Gungans and the Naboo stronger.
It's a lot there. A lot there. Check it out, folks. Seriously, Shadow Warrior. Go dive in.
If you just cornered someone and said, okay, do you think all of these things happen in one episode of the Clone Wars?
And they're like, okay, yeah. They're like, but here's the thing: it stars Jar Jar Binks. Oh no, because I can't like that character. I've been told.
And this is one of those ones like, Jar Jar does some silly things, and then Anakin is shocked and tortured. Like 87 times brutally. Major Phantom Menace character meets his end. Amazing stuff in this episode.
Yeah, right. It's oh my gosh. Yeah, don't get me started. Love it so much. It's great.
Pour one out for, I don't know. I don't want to spoil that. Anyway, if you haven't seen this episode, check out Shadow Warrior and see who you think this Shadow Warrior is. That is it for our questions, but we do, total opposite of Shadow Warrior, have a Power of the Light Side submission. We started asking our patrons on Patreon to submit something they love about Star Wars. Could be a specific moment, could be a specific memory, because every once in a while, a Star Wars discourse can dive into the dark side, and we just wanted to do something to remind all of us, ourselves included, that we actually do love this Star Wars thing and it makes a difference in our lives. So that's what that's all about. This one comes to us from Bryce. Bryce says, my Power of the Light Side involves watching Star Wars with my four-year-old son, Ezra, not named after the Star Wars character. On the podcast, you all talk often about entry points into the Star Wars universe. Well, my son's entry point has proven to be Star Wars Resistance, followed closely by the sequel era films. When he wants to watch Star Wars, he wants to watch Kaz Star Wars, or Rey Star Wars, or Poe Star Wars, or even BB-8 Star Wars. In fact, I'm virtually unable to watch any of the original or prequel films with him because he constantly wants to know where Kaz is, or where Rey is, or where Poe is, and he gets grumpy if they don't show up. I know that the sequel era films, and Resistance in particular, are looked down upon by many in Star Wars fandom, but the best Star Wars to me will always be the Star Wars I get to watch with my kid while sitting on the couch. That is a great Power of the Light Side. Ken, what are your thoughts or reactions?
There's literally the note I wrote in our show notes. Yeah, that's the stuff right there. That's what it's about in so many ways, and why, especially over even the last year, I think I've gotten a little bit more stringent on my views on entry points and defending not Star Wars the brand, not Lucasfilm or Disney the companies, not even the actors and directors and performers in them. Defending what Star Wars means to everybody. Everybody, no matter what age, which generation, whatever your engagement is. Have your snarky jokes. I just saw this morning one on a reel, someone making fun of the old lady at the end of Rise of Skywalker. How big of you. How funny of you. You're going to go out and take that joy that scene might provide for someone, the lessons that someone might provide, and what it means to the youngsters. Yeah, Star Wars Resistance was gone in 2 seasons, and it's a blip on the radar screen, and sometimes you look in the rearview mirror. It's deep. It has dark themes throughout some of the episodes, some characters new to the series that you and I and so many people love, and it's also it's Kaz Star Wars. That's amazing to hear. That's amazing to hear. And I love it. Again, I'm not defending a brand because the brand doesn't need to be defended. The zeros that they are deposited in the Disney banks, even if they're struggling. Sorry, Iger. Sorry, Chapek. They're still going strong. Star Wars could end tomorrow. Its legacy's cemented. It doesn't need defending. But I do feel that this is the kind of folks and this is the kind of fan that I want to not necessarily defend, like, again, they need it, but I want to be on the lines with them, celebrating this part of Star Wars and looking at Star Wars in this way. Yes, we have our favorites. Yes, you might like Andor more than Book of Boba Fett. You might like Kenobi more than Mando. You might like Attack of the Clones more than any of it. It doesn't matter. You're here for what you love, and I love hearing these stories. Bryce, this is a wonderful, wonderful stories. And I want to watch post-Star Wars and Rey Star Wars. I definitely want to watch BB-8 Star Wars with you and your family.
Yeah, man, and the joy then that Bryce's son can get Kaz Star Wars and then Poe and BB-8 Star Wars right in the Kaz Star Wars with those appearances. Yes, that's so great. Yeah, well said to everything. The basic response I wrote on my notes is, this made my heart grow 3 sizes. It's just I think it is just the spirit of loving what you love, and giving people time to grow, and maybe Bryce's son will grow up to love all Star Wars, but man, Kaz Star Wars and Rey Star Wars, that will always be, that's his entry point, that's his love, and there's nothing wrong with that. We're all born different times, we all encounter things different times. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. For me, it's just really great to hear. I really like Resistance. I think the Resistance is very well done. There's so many things about it that I love and celebrate. But one of the things about it is, hey, they tell us, hey, it's pitched to this age to draw people into Star Wars, and it's got plenty of stuff for adults too. But it's great to hear that it is working to draw kids of specific ages in. And say, what's this Star Wars thing about? Is Kaz going to be okay this week? Do his friends still like him? Is he in trouble? Like all this, can he get down the hall without slipping? I'm worried about Kaz. Or can he get that ship fixed? Come on, man. It's really gratifying to hear that the intent of the show works on the audience. And then we've talked about the ups and downs with the sequels, but it's so great, even from a 4-year-old, to begin to hear the people who are going to receive it differently. The sequel kids who get to watch all 3 films back to back, free of preconceived notions, free from multiple years of speculating, free from even any knowledge of who Rian Johnson or J.J. Abrams or Kathleen Kennedy are. That they're freed from Team Last Jedi, Team Rise of Skywalker, freed from all of that, and they are just sitting down and watching the story. They're just watching Rey and Poe and BB-8s and everybody's story. I can't wait until that generation is really coming of age and really sharing a different perspective on what the sequel trilogy films are, freed of some of the other baggage. And totally with you. Obviously always okay to talk about what you don't like, what you didn't like, what worked for you, what you didn't, what's your favorite, why, all that stuff. And I'll start by saying one of my favorite things is Old Woman with Knee Toby at the end of Rise of Skywalker. One of the best lines in the films, I think. There's been no one for so long. It's literal about the Lars Homestead, but it's so much more about the galaxy needing heroes. That subtext there is beautiful, and I want to celebrate that.
Yeah, it's a wonderful moment. Absolutely. Yeah. Bryce, this is a great share. Truly power of the light side reflected.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Bryce. And thank you everyone else who submitted questions. Ken, where can people find us?
Oh, you can find us on Twitter at ForceCenter Pod. We're on Hive Social. If you would go over there at ForceCenter, Facebook page is ForceCenter Podcast, Instagram, and of course, YouTube. We'll announce a live Q&A shortly for January as we get ready for the launch of Figure Fights and more on the YouTube channel in February. Podcast is available on Acast, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and more. Just search, you'll find us. Merch available at tpublic.com/user/ForceCenter, and patreon.com/ForceCenter is where you can support us. And from there, you can submit part of the light sides. You can get in the Discord, a lot of cool things. We have our show, Will of the Force, on there as well, a bonus show for all of you there. You can find me at Ken Napzok, or go to my website, kennapzok.com, for more. I am launching new shows on my podcast feed and doing some more with Saturday Night Napzok, more things coming there. So follow me there if you want more information there. Joseph, where can they find and follow you?
Yeah, you can find me on lots of different social media under the handle Joseph Scrimshaw. Instagram in particular, I want to promote because people are spending some more time there. I'm still on Twitter as well. I am also on TikTok. You can find me there. And you can also go to my YouTube page. Just search for Joseph Scrimshaw. Got a lot more stuff coming in the new year on YouTube. Thank you to everyone who has been so supportive there. But that is it For now, for myself, for Ken, for Han and Lando at any age, this has been Cues of the Force.